Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Carson. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Moosic Boys podcast. It's a lot of fun recording these episodes and putting them together, and I cannot wait to do more of these episodes for you guys in the future. But for now, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, I'm back with another podcast episode. This time I have the amazing composer for multiple games, multiple big games that you may know, like Star Wars Outlaws, Mortal Kombat 11, Mortal Kombat 1, Pacific Drive, Helldivers 2, and many more. I'm very happy to have Wilbert Roget II on this month's episode. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode, enjoy this talk. It was a lot of fun to record with him. He's such a cool guy, and we just have a lot of good stuff that we talk about in this episode, so hope you guys enjoy this. Well, I wanted to say thank you again, though, for coming on the podcast. I'm really happy to have you here, and I know a lot of people within Plot Coalition actually are all really excited for this, and those are the primary people. Whenever I told you before about like all the hype people, it's a lot of them. They think that's super cool. So again, thank you for coming on the show.
For sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. I actually had a question. How many people are involved with Plot Coalition?
Plot Coalition. So let's see. So there's typically, I think there's about, let me think, 4. I don't think it typically goes over 5. There's like less than 5 animators, I think, typically. For the whole thing. There's a few people that do modeling. I'm trying to remember how many. One of them that does models quite often, I think, is a person. Their username is Lord Cringefest. I don't know if they like going by their real name. That's their name is Lord Cringefest. And they're the ones that I want to say modeled the kind of little pendulum thing in episode 1 of Heroes of the Galactic War. That bike that was in the second episode of that show. And so I think there's, again, like under 5 for that. Sound-wise, typically there was 3, but for the second episode, I hopped on, and so technically 4 sound people, 2 composers, myself and Owen Guidex. But it's still pretty small overall, and it's all remote work. So, one of the animators, I think, is over in Europe, and then a lot of us are scattered throughout the USA, and I think a couple members are military, so they, have a certain amount of time where they can do stuff, and then they, have to go away, and then to come back, and so. But yeah, definitely not a lot of people. Definitely not a whole lot. I'd say maybe 50 or less, probably, for sure. But
well, congratulations again. I mean, like, what they do is just so cool.
Oh, yes, 1,000%. It is very cool. And I'm really excited to keep doing more stuff and see where that leads, and that's going to be really fun. But I was wondering how, I ask everyone this just because it's just something that I'm interested in, and kind of getting to know you guys a little bit more. How did you get into music and music composition? Because, I mean, for some people, that's like, that's always a thing. Maybe their parents forced them to play piano when they're younger. And then, some people, it's like not really a thing, and then later on it becomes. So I was wondering how you got into it.
Oh, well, I was like a very annoying 3-year-old, and my parents just needed to get rid of me for like maybe just an hour or so, at least once a week. And so that's why I got sent off to like take piano lessons. And it was that little kid energy where it's like you needed this kid to just be doing something. It could have been anything, but I had a really great piano teacher, and then we wanted to find someone a little closer, so I had another piano teacher a couple years later who was incredible. And she actually... It's so funny because like it wasn't even just that she was only a piano teacher. She was from China, and so of course she, in a very hardcore way, taught the mechanics of like, this is piano practice, very strict and stuff. But it was more than that. It was also like musicianship teaching. She would introduce us to concepts of like even music history and music, to some small extent music theory, but she would take us to like I don't know if this is, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but like there is more of a ranking tradition with Chinese teachers. Okay. And she had no problem with just ranking her student. Everyone was with a rank. I feel like Americans wouldn't tend to do that. But I think I was like number 3. And so she would take her top 3 students to concerts. And, just to see like, this is what a masterful pianist looks like. This is how you should, like study this. And she would even show us like art museums and like along the way to the concerts and stuff like that. And it was just such like I feel I really do feel terrible that I eventually became a teenager and kind of lapsed on. I like stopped practicing, skipped out of lessons. She was giving us discounts and stuff like crazy because my family didn't have a ton of money, and so it was incredible, and that really set the stage. But then, of course, later on, I discovered video games, and my whole life went downhill from there.
Downhill from
so yeah, at middle school, I just discovered Mortal Kombat was the kind of the first video game that I became obsessed with. And then after that, eventually we got a PlayStation and I started playing Final Fantasy VII. And that's when I specifically decided, yes, I want to write video game music. And then I have not matured ever since then, pretty much.
And what a full circle moment for you to also get back to Mortal Kombat and actually getting to work on those games, the 11 and 1.
Yeah.
Which, again, I love those scores. I recently have been listening to the Pyramid Stage music. Been listening to that a lot. Cool. I really like all that. I really like the guitar in that. I like the guitar in the main theme. I'm a big guitar guy, so I'm a big fan of all that.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of those scores, and also obviously I'm a big Helldivers fan, being as someone that's worked on and all the Plot Coalition stuff. So I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of the original score, and the second game score that you and Ross Triggins both worked on. And I was wondering, because I don't really think it's really a debate. I genuinely think that most people would agree that the HD2 theme is like one of the most iconic game themes of the last 10 years maybe, like one of the best ones in games for a while.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I know I believe that. I know several other people believe that. And I mean, even whenever I was at GDC, like I know there are people that obviously know you there, like for example Austin Wintory. But I mean, just like for the 3 seconds I met him, I mentioned something about Helldivers, and he goes, "Bam, bam, bam, bam." And so it's just, so it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's just so everyone knows it. Everyone in the game world, I feel like, knows that theme. So I was wondering how you came up with it. Was that the original, like what we got? Was that the original kind of melody for the main theme? And how did you what did you reference to get to that point of the final version?
Yeah, well, maybe even a year before I really started working on the game, I did another piece, which was more of like a rearrangement of the Helldivers 1 main theme by Johan Lindgren. It was more just like, let's one-to-one do that, but just with more Hollywooded out modern orchestration and arrangement and that kind of thing, and trying to make it a little bit more epic for the sequel, of course. Fast forward, and I took some meetings at Arrowhead to hang out with the the art lead and all of the audio people, and of course with Johan and Emil and Evan. And I basically figured out okay, well, this is what the in-game music should sound like, and I started writing that. And then Sony gets back to me because they sort of injected themselves between me and Arrowhead at that point, and then I've just worked with Sony's PlayStation music group from that point on. And they said, cool, we like what you're doing with this in-game Terminids music. That's kind of where I started. But by the way, put that aside and rewrite the main theme. We freaking hate it. We don't like it at all. Write something else, just start from scratch.
Wonderful.
And so that was kind of a shock because I was like, I thought we had already progressed beyond this point, but I don't remember, honestly, I don't remember if it was like with Call of Duty where I had to retry a bunch of different things. I think I just did one thing and then we kind of went from there. In terms of how did I write the piece? Well, I knew that we wanted something that was epic and encouraging and positive, but the spin that I wanted to put on it was that, a couple things. From a emotional standpoint, I wanted it to feel like you are actually there. I really wanted players to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and to feel like what they're doing actually matters. And so that's kind of why it has that structure where it starts off energetic, epic, whatever, but then it becomes somber. And then after the somber part, it becomes more of almost like a military triumph that's very sincere. And I thought it really could use that. I was actually quite influenced by the way that Harry Gregson Williams arranged the Metal Gear theme in Metal Gear Solid 2. So that's kind of where the men's choir comes in at the very end. That's sort of why I did that. It's a homage to the Metal Gear 2 theme. But then on a more technical level, I wanted to do, I think, 2 or 3 things. Let's see if I remember. In terms of the melody, it's actually quite obvious. I saw the cutscene of you're diving down, and then once you've hit the planet, then you slowly rise up. So I thought it would be cool to mimic that with the melody's contour. So that's actually quite deliberate.
Okay.
And, you know, I thought about it. I'm very careful about the rhythm in my themes, or at least I tried to be. And I thought about it, and I realized it would hit so hard if we just land right on the downbeat. Normally, for some reason, my themes don't start right on the downbeat, but in this case, it made perfect sense to do that. And then I also wanted to be in 5/4 time signature because I just felt like I actually really don't like writing in 4/4 at all. Sometimes you have to, but I don't really enjoy it. And I wanted to find some way to just be more automatically unique. And so that was a very great opportunity there. Plus, there's the whole Mars, the Bringer of War piece, which is like a 20th century art music piece that everyone knows. And that's in 5/4, and it's sort of established 5/4 as like the military kind of martial Ares kind of time signature. So I kind of combined all of those two, and I got the first like one measure of the piece, maybe. Or at least of the melody. But I had absolutely no idea where it should go from there. And I was just in my room just like stressing over this for hours, and I couldn't think of anything else besides that very first bar. So I literally just took my little notebook and went off to like a cafe somewhere nearby and just wrote it freehand, like the rest of the entire piece from there.
That's cool.
It was so weird, like just getting away from the computers and synthesizers and stuff and just going somewhere else is really what made it so much more clear what the music should be once I had a general idea of the aesthetic I wanted to go from. And that was it. I mean, it's kind of funny, like a lot of people think that this is a very Starship Troopers homage. They're like, this sounds just like the what's it, Klendathu
Drop.
Yeah.
I know.
And I know the piece for sure, and I definitely did eventually research Starship Troopers and take notes on every single cue in the film. To my ears, they sound nothing alike. I'm actually not sure why people, but I mean, I'm very close to the metal, so that's probably why. But in my perspective, it's more of like a combination of all of these other things. And then lastly, on a technical level, at the time I was really fascinated by FM synthesis, and I wanted to do a score that combined a lot of FM synthesis, which is a way that synthesizers, like digital synthesizers, work. I wanted to combine that with hardware analog synthesis and just see what happens when we put the two together. And you can see that very clearly in the main theme. I think that I know that the bass line is literally an FM8 patch and an Arturia, what's this called? Mini Freak 2? Something like, or no, I'm sorry, not Mini Freak, Mini Brute 2S.
Okay.
And I just like literally it's the same pattern but just on 2 different synths, and I mix them together. And I think possibly the sort of kick drum like constant kind of thing, I think that might also be FM, just like an FM percussion kind of thing. But yeah, on a technical level, that's what I wanted to accomplish. And then, of course, on an emotional level, which is more important, I wanted it to be music that really sounds like you are a part of something that's bigger than yourself. So even though it's technically satire, the music takes it completely seriously.
I'm a big fan of the. I obviously am a big fan of all the themes. I really like the strings that you use that are recorded in this, just the way that the string players play it, and kind of like I guess a Bollywood style or something similar. And the Illuminate theme, I'm a big fan of that. You used. I was curious what like primary synths you used for the Illuminate stuff.
All of them.
All of them.
You know what I like to do is I like to almost kind of rank all of the synths or order the synthesizers that I have in terms of how, this is going to sound so weird, how safe they sound. And by safe, I mean like on the one extreme you have something like maybe Vital, which is like a software wavetable synth.
I love Vital.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite to design on, but it's very safe sounding. Like what you put in is exactly what comes out, and it always sounds very controlled, except when it has like a weird bug, which does happen, unfortunately. But it always sounds very controlled. Whereas on the other extreme, you have some like weird, there's some like strange reactor ensembles that you have like no control over. Some of these hardware synthesizers are very mad scientist-y, like the MS-20. It's got this crazy filter, and then I might even run it through some guitar pedals. Actually, this is unfortunately broken, but this is one of my favorites to use. It's called a Geiger counter, which is sort of like a digital delay.
I want to say I've seen Mick Gordon use that one. I could be wrong. I want to say I feel like I've seen that around.
I mean, probably. He's got like every conceivable pedal, every weird. We took a walk through this synthesizer shop in San Francisco 2 years ago, I want to say, and Rostring Anzer was there. Actually, that's where we met, and we found this like ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if this podcast is PG-13 or what's the deal.
No, you can go for whatever.
I don't even remember, but it was just like the most sexually explicit guitar pedal. It was like, why would you name it this? And it had like images, drawings, and it was just so gross. And I was like, what the hell? And Mick's like, oh yeah, I have 2 of those. I'm like, what? This looks like something that someone just made. How do you have 2 of these? But
that's hilarious.
But regardless, yeah. So in the Illuminate theme, long story short, I used a lot of the more unusual, atypical synths. A lot of reactor ensembles that I found just wherever on the internet that people that are hobbyists were like, I made this cool, very weird thing. Check it out. Of course, the Mini Brute as well is used pretty prominently, actually. And probably not a lot of this Moog. I would say that the Moog Sub-Fatty is another very controlled, dialed-in synth that's amazing for basses and for that theatrical kind of Hans Zimmer sound. But it's also quite predictable and quite controlled. And then for the Illuminates, I wanted it to be very just jittery and unpredictable and strange as possible. If I remember correctly, there's also a lot of sample-based stuff that I created myself. Like, I think that I have a synthesizer that's actually just babies crying.
Oh, nice.
And I took the babies crying and then I time stretched it like 1,000% or whatever, or 10,000%, whatever it is. And then when you hit a key, it starts to be, it kind of sounds like it's playing that note, but it always kind of fluctuates. And it's just very disturbing sounding. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of synth design in that piece. I can't even. I'd have to look it up because there's just so much. It's kind of ridiculous, but yeah, it was mostly those irresponsible mad scientist kind of synthesizers that I used.
As kind of moving away from Helldivers a little bit, because I'm a big fan of Outlaws, the music from Outlaws, everything that you did, everything that John Everest did, everyone that the whole team. I like all the music. I was wondering what kind of in today's world, because back John Williams, there wasn't really I don't think there probably wasn't any synth or anything, not that you could obviously hear, but and because he was very much inspired by like the planets and all that kind of stuff. So I was wondering, in today's more modern world, how you and the team kind of decided the blend between the orchestral, more maybe John Williams approach versus the electronics. When do you merge the two? When is it more just this should be John Williams? And when is it more expanding upon that? I was curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, like, you would be surprised how much synthesizer there is in the Star Wars scores, especially.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even back in The Empire Strikes Back, it has very prominent synthesizer lines, like when he's going through, like, the evil tree, Dagobah, that whole thing, and he sees the visions and all that. Very, very prominent. The thing is that John Williams really likes to not do a lot of post-processing. He wants to have everyone kind of in the room together. So he'll hire a synthesizer performer and programmer and they'll be like in the orchestra, and then of course they have, Abbey Road will just kind of route them however they need to, so that John Williams can hear it, but then also it has its own separate track for like if they want to mix it in certain ways. But even in the prequels especially, there's quite a lot of synthesizer. There's this one cue, I forget the name, but it's when they're first going to Coruscant, and it's got that really beautiful fanfare. And I think, if I remember correctly, the whole string section is doubled with synth strings to get like an extra just epic thing. It's pretty hard to hear, but yeah. And anyway, so the point is that like it was already there. It's just not as prominent. For Outlaws, though, from the very beginning, and actually even in my demo, I specified this. I figured out that the part of Star Wars Outlaws that's not shown in the films is the criminal syndicates. You don't really see a lot of that. Instead, you see the Empire, you see the Jedi, the Sith, and all that kind of romantic stuff. So that's my take on why you hear a lot of orchestral music in the films, but the synth is only barely there. And so for Outlaws, since crime syndicates were such a big deal there, we decided, or I guess I decided, okay, whenever it's dealing with low-level crime, like low-intensity things like stealth, sneaking around, stealing things, heists, that should be a lot more of this new kind of sound, which is a lot of synthesizer, a lot of world instruments, a lot of solos, that kind of thing. And as you're getting more and more intense, like the combat intensity ramps up, then we get more and more orchestra. And then finally, when it's like super epic, it should be almost entirely orchestral.
Okay.
And this is for big moments like, you're taking off and landing from a planet, or like space battles, or anything to do with the Empire. So we actually, in my design document that I shared with all of the composer team, it's almost like a line. It's like wait, let me get my angle. Okay, a number line. Where like on one side you have the John Williams originals, on the other side you have the Outlaws sound, and every single piece exists somewhere within this line. And we just decide ahead of time, even before we start writing, like, well, where in this line should, the Pike Syndicate theme go? Where should the music for Mira, the city, where should that be? And things like that. And eventually that made it much easier to have conversations about the music direction for every single piece.
I really, man, I'm trying to remember the song name specifically. I think it's the city on the planet Mira. I think that one is. I love all the music, but I feel like that one especially is like a more of a quote unquote hidden gem, I guess. I'm a big fan of that one. I like there's some really cool string stuff and maybe some kind of woodwind or something in that one, and it's just so I like.
You're talking about the sort of jungle planet.
I think so. Yeah.
Akiva is the name of the planet, and Mira is the city.
Yes. That's what it is. That's what it is.
I get them flipped. Yeah. It was great. That one was a collaboration with John Everest as the composer, and a woodwind player named Kristen Nigas, and she plays over probably 200 different woodwinds from all around the world by now, and they worked together, just figuring out like what are some cool woodwinds. Here's like he put together like a kind of MIDI temp thing, and sort of sends that to her, and it was like, well, what do you think could work for here? And if I remember correctly, she used a contrabass recorder, which literally looks like she went to a church and like stole a pipe off of the organ and then just absconded with it, went home. It's that big, but it sounded gorgeous, and that's a lot of what you hear on the planet Akiva, and I think especially in Mira.
Okay. I was also wondering, you kind of talked about it a little bit just now, but you've worked on a couple different, obviously a couple being quite a bit, a various amount of games, and some of them, Outlaws, to an extent Helldivers too, I guess, Mortal Kombat, there's a lot of additional composers. So I was wondering how you approach working with other people and how you all work together to individually make it sound unique to, maybe your own certain styles, but also how do you make it all cohesive while also doing that? I was curious how you guys kind of work together to get to that final product.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying there's two reasons why you would have a team rather than just one person. The first, and this is the one that applied to Outlaws, is that when you don't want the whole game to sound like just one voice, but you really want it to sound like a journey. And so immediately, the first choice was Kazuma Junichi. So he was the first person that I brought in because he had done music for Star Wars Visions, which is that sort of like, here's a couple of different like takes on Star Wars, like micro episodes. And he also worked on Metal Gear. So he was the composer of Metal Gear Solid 4 and Peace Walker. And I figured, okay, well, Outlaws is going to have so much stealth. It would be great to have someone who has that experience on the team. So he was kind of the easier sell to like Ubisoft and Lucasfilm. But then I had another friend, John Everest, who I knew was... he was a very brilliant synthesist, and he did this score to a game called Disintegration, which not as popular, but I definitely recommend checking it out because the music he wrote for it was absolutely brilliant. And I figured, okay, well, it would be really cool to have someone who has almost the exact opposite experience of Kazuma and I, where he comes from like the EDM world, but then he also kind of does orchestral music, and then Kazuma and I keep messing up his name. Kazuma and I, we have more orchestral experience, and so it would be such a great way to make sure that as you're playing the game, if the planets are each scored by a different composer, it feels like you're actually going on a journey and not just hearing the same voice over and over. So that was that. The second reason why you might bring in additional writers is if you ran out of time. And so this did come up sort of on Outlaws. And so that's why I brought in Ben Ash, Brendan Williams, and Joel Santos. But they were kind of later in the project, and their role was less independent. They kind of just worked for me. And it was less of like, here's vague parameters and do whatever you want, and I'll kind of help you if you need it, but like basically do whatever you want. It was more like, here's much more specific parameters. I still obviously wanted their creativity, but it was more collaborative with those three, whereas with John and Kazuma, it was a little bit more independent.
Okay. I see. So was that something for Helldivers that I don't know how involved that would have been between you and Ross, because I feel like it's like so different what you guys did while also being the same. Because, you know, I feel like most of his music, I think, plays on the ship specifically. Was there any kind of collaborative process with Helldivers?
It's like the promotional, like
videos,
advertisements.
And the Dragonza flag, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Was there any kind of thing with that?
No, I actually didn't know who he was until we got to the recording session, and then like the orchestrator was like, "Hey, who is Ross Tregenza?" And I'm like, "Who is Ross Tregenza?" I was like, "Oh, I guess this is for the same game." But his stuff sounded very different, so I was a little confused at first. But then of course, obviously, it turned out that it was for like almost like a diegetic. Like it's like his music exists in the actual
universe,
world.
Yeah.
Whereas mine is more of like the emotional, like this is like I'm speaking to the players rather than to the characters.
Yeah.
So no, I think, I actually don't know. Surprisingly, I think we were geeking out about synth stuff that I never asked him like how he got on the phone. So I'm actually not sure, but
that's so funny.
It's possible that the audio director of Arrowhead at the time had hired him, or it is possible that Sony did, but I genuinely am not sure.
That's so funny.
But obviously we're very grateful that he did get hired eventually, and then wrote all of the kind of diegetic music that we know and love from Helldivers.
Yeah, everyone loves the Super Earth the theme. That's one of the in a lot of the, I wouldn't say briefs, but like whenever we were talking about like For Liberty and stuff, those like one of the bigger things that they're like, all right, if you want to reference something, this is like one thing we really want you to reference in your music, with stuff like that. It was like that, obviously the main theme from Helldivers 2 and some Helldivers 1 stuff. Owen is really good about implementing the Helldivers 1 stuff. I really enjoy the music, obviously. The only difference is I never played the game for the first one, and so it's like, because I played 2 and my introduction to Helldivers was Helldivers 2, that's just my more automatic thought, and that's why I feel like he's a lot better with implementing that stuff. There was one part, though, in this most recent episode we did. He used one of the higher level Illuminate themes from the first game, and I ended up playing electric guitar over top of that, and doing
nice.
a little bit of improv, but primarily just sticking with that, and that was really fun. And I've listened to, obviously, Johan's music on that, and it's all phenomenal.
Yeah. It's a very difficult game. I think it's much harder than Helldivers 2, actually.
Really? The style of game is different, right? It's like
it's a totally different kind of game. So maybe it's because I haven't really played shooters that like top-down shooters much, but like even in like the lowest difficulty, I was having trouble, which was like so embarrassing. It was like, what the hell?
It's okay. I don't play those kinds of games either. So honestly, I think I'd probably struggle with that too. You also, another game that you worked on was Pacific Drive, which that's one that I'm planning on getting around to. Right now, I just finished Bond. I'm working on
Oh, nice.
I really like Bond. I don't know if you've finished that one.
Yeah, I just finished it a couple days ago. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. That one I enjoyed. There are some missions where I was a little iffy, but overall I really liked it. I thought that the snow environment at the end, towards the end, I thought that was just so pretty. I really liked that one. But yes, playing Chronos right now, and then I'm gonna get around to Pacific Drive either next or the next one. You know how it is. I have such a backlog and get so busy, and so I mean that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But I've obviously listened to the music from base game, from some of the Whispering Woods stuff.
Oh, cool.
I was also wondering, because obviously you're approaching it differently, because it's more electronic focused, especially like stuff like Instability, that track, that one especially. I mean all of them, but that's one of my favorite ones, and that's why I bring that one up. And it's very electronic heavy. It might be specific to each game, but just generally, what kind of things do you look at differently with electronic stuff that's more electronic? Like, how do you approach that a little different from orchestral stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really does depend. Like, some pieces I can write on paper first. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a piece from the original Pacific Drive, the main release soundtrack, it's called Passacaglia. Yes. And that one, like, I wrote on paper. I think I wrote it on paper first, like, entirely, and possibly even the main theme, because it's more... They have more of a form to them, and so it was easier to be like, well, this is a melody focused. But something like Instability, it's like there really is no melody. It's just kind of vibes throughout the way. And I think for that, it was just... the way I started the soundtrack was not with notes, but with sound. And especially in the DLC, like, it was more about, let me make a bunch of sounds that feel like they should fit in this world. And then I wrote the music. So, like, I designed a lot of, like, synth sounds in Contact, like different pads and leads and basses. And then also in Arteria Pigments, which I really loved for Pacific Drive because it has a granular synth engine. And probably some other synthesizers in there that I'm not remembering right now. But, I really started with creating the sounds first and then writing the music afterwards. It's so weird. It's almost like the music is an afterthought, but the creativity is in, like, making the sounds first and creating a palette. And then, just whatever music kind of emanates from this palette is what goes into the game. Very different from how I write orchestral music, where it's like you have to plan every single note, and the form is like incredibly important. But yeah, that's kind of how I went about Pacific Drive, and it was such a great learning experience because normally I tell story and emotion with harmony. That's kind of the way that I do things. Maybe this is like a relic of just growing up with John Williams's and Thomas Newman's music, but harmony is usually the way that I describe a scene. The thing is, I figured out very early on that it does not work for me to have almost any harmonic sophistication at all for Pacific Drive. Like, even the very first area, it's called the Woods biome. Only 2 chords fit.
Really?
Like, only 2 chords. I can only use D minor and A minor, and then just offshoots of those. But that's it. That's like the only harmonic palette that I had to work with. which was a challenge at first. But then once I kind of got used to that and accepted it and sort of internalized, this means you have to work more with texture than with harmony this time. Then it was much more fluent and really it's just such a fun score to work on. It's so funny, man. Like I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Seattle,
Yeah.
and the game takes place in Seattle. And a lot of the time when I was writing, it was in the winter where it's very gloomy and gray, and I could literally just look out my window and just grab a guitar and just start playing what I was seeing out the window. Like
That
that's
sounds
how kind of one-to-one the scoring of that game was. So I feel very grateful that I got a chance to work on that.
Mm-hmm. I also really like the vocalist for that one, the main theme and some of the other tracks. I really like some of that. That was, I want to say, was that at GDC? Not this year, but past years. Wasn't that song at one of the concerts?
Yeah, D'Anthony Wooten. He's the vocalist. And so what Austin did such a crazy thing for me. So he said, you know what, I'm going to do with the GDC Orchestra, we're going to do a medley of like a bunch of your different scores, most of which came out in 2024 because that year was kind of insane with releases. And so yeah, he was there for the Pacific Drive part of the medley at the very beginning, I believe. And I mean, brilliant performer. It was so great working with him. He's on I think 3 different tracks in the album, and I mean, his vocals really just brought an emotion to the score that not really possible without some kind of a vocal presence, and especially one that's so unique as how he sounds. Yeah,
I also think that it was really important to have that because, obviously, like I said, there's a lot of electronics and synths, and that's just so important as well because I feel like it kind of grounds it a little bit more, and adds that more like human element to it. And I really enjoyed that. That's one of the things I really like about that score is the fact that it has both of those things, which is really cool. I also wanted to kind of ask you for maybe some more direct advice, I guess. Whenever we're gonna go back to Helldivers because that's just just such a prominent part of my life right now. I was wondering what kind of advice you might have for myself and for example, maybe the other composer or people in general wanting to write more Helldivers themed music. Do you have any advice on how to kind of shape and solidify that kind of style, that kind of sound? And
how to sound more like Helldivers? You mean?
I guess pretty much. Yeah, kind of like. But yeah,
I've been thinking about that lately. The Helldivers sound is not one specific sound, right? Because we have like 4 different factions, right? We have the humans, of course, which is like the triumphant Helldiver themed or Super Earth themed music, and it has a certain sort of old school cinema orchestral kind of thing with a little bit of synthesizer thrown in and sometimes rock drums. But then you actually get into the mission, and now it's like, all right, well, the bugs sound a certain way, and the bots sound a certain way, and the squids sound a certain way, and so it's like, we have all that. And so I guess the real question is, what unifies all of this? And I think I know the answer, and it's not a good one. The problem is that I never had like a mentor in Hollywood. It's like I never kind of grew up as a composer working underneath like a prominent Hollywood figure. So everything I do is sort of like, on the surface, it probably doesn't seem all that particularly interesting or unique, but underneath the surface, you realize that like everything I'm doing is like duct tape, popsicle sticks, like nothing I do is correct. It's always sort of like I somehow found my way into the Hollywood quote unquote sound, but like in a very unusual way. And what this often means is that harmonies very often are not what people probably think they are. Harmonically, I have more influence from like Slavic music actually than I do Western classical music, and so there's a lot more, like rogue major seconds thrown in, and just unusual blendings of harmony and extended harmony. In terms of the orchestration, for some reason, and I still do not know why, but this is just a particular length of rope that I've used as my own noose for writing Helldivers music. It's very 20th century art music influenced rather than Hollywood influenced. So you'll get a lot of just kind of very difficult orchestrations and difficult rhythms and difficult kind of very complicated articulations that are not incredibly easy to replicate unless you do study that sort of 20th century art music. There's a lot of Stravinsky and Schoenberg in there. There's a lot of even a little bit of Bartok you can hear in like the Bugs themes and stuff. But it's just like sort of, it's got this spiky sort of art music sort of thing to it. Which I don't think Sony liked very much.
Yeah.
There are multiple times when they had me rewrite entire sections of music and they were like, this sounds too academic. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do here. But I'll try to maybe dumb it down or something. But I understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, it's like, you look back, especially to the 1990s and the 1980s, at some of these film scores that, you know, people like John Williams and Danny Elfman and especially Elliot Goldenthal were writing. They're writing music for very similar projects. They are writing music for sci-fi, space sci-fi, you know, action sci-fi. And they're incorporating a lot of 20th century art music into their work. And so that's kind of what I was going for, rather than the more modern Hollywood, which is not necessarily coming from that background, but it's more of coming from like you'll have a lot of composers now who obviously they can write for the orchestra, but their background is maybe from perhaps they were rock musicians, EDM musicians, and so they kind of bring that level of sophistication to and like their experiences there, and then they marry that with the orchestra, and that's how a score gets produced. Whereas back in the day, it was more about actually they're coming from an art music perspective and then bringing that in. The Matrix as well is another great example of this. So I think that's the only consistent thing that I can say about all of the actual gameplay music is that it does very much come from an art music background that's kind of filtered into the cinematic. Okay. And then, of course, there's always a lot of synthesis involved, which I think can kind of be anything as long as it's, obviously it has to be creative and it's not, dial up a patch on Zebra and call it a day with the preset or anything like that. There is a lot of granular synthesis, I realize. I do use a lot of plugins, like I mentioned, Arteria Pigments, and there's also one called Output Portal, which is sort of like a granular, it's like a granular effect that you can do a lot of cool stuff. So I remember I used that a lot on the Bugs theme. Like maybe I would have either a synthesizer or even an orchestral part, but I would run it through a granularizer and then it sounds completely different. Especially with drums actually in that, if I remember correctly. Long story short, Helldivers music is ridiculously hard, and if it's easy for you, then great, but probably that means that consider working harder. I don't know.
Yeah, that's something I was curious about, because I mean, obviously, it's something that you wanna keep that kind of musical identity from kind of across the games, but also like it's you want to keep that and make sure that people can recognize it and be like, oh yeah, this sounds like it, but also it be something completely new and different. That's one of those things where I've just in my head every single time I'm working on it, I'm like, man, like I don't know about this. I'm not sure about this, and that's
it's so weird because it's like I thought about it and I was like every time I come back to do like a DLC or whatever, I'm like, why is this so difficult? Why did I make this? Why did I, they gave me just enough rope to hang myself. Like, why is this so hard? And then I eventually realized that that's kind of the common thread, is that it doesn't really sound like Helldivers unless it's at like the extreme of my own competence, let's say. And like, I had, I'm sorry to detour again, but I had this, music theory professor back in college, and he's also a very, very gifted pianist, and he was saying that he went to a concert or a recital of a different pianist, and that particular pianist had chosen a piece that was just slightly too difficult for him.
No.
Like just ever so slightly too difficult for him to perform. And he said that's the best kind of concert, actually, when like if it were, some amazing, world famous whatever who can just play this in their sleep, then it's kind of, like a Lang Lang type. Then it's like, that's not really as thrilling as seeing someone who's like just barely hanging on and just you're like cheering for them, like, you can make it, keep going, you can do it, so that's basically me with Helldivers music. I'm like the tortoise that's just barely like you can make it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask one last thing, because I asked this to everyone just to see the different answers and everything, and see what people have to say. But do you have any advice for people just either people wanting to get into music or people that want to get into scoring? Is there any advice that you would give people to try and get into that these days?
So do you mean in terms of learning the craft, or do you mean more just like the business kind of side? Or
I would say if they've kind of learned the craft, like say someone, is in college for that kind of stuff, but obviously they're learning more about composition itself and not so much getting into it. So I guess kind of more the business side. How do you actually break into that kind of world if you have the ability and the know-how?
If you ask 50, the reason that I actually I'm not a huge fan of this question, and I don't mean to talk shit, but the reason why is that I always feel terrible whenever I give any answer, because it's like you ask 50 composers how they got in, and you'll get 51 different answers, and there is no definite way to make sure that you'll get in other than just persistence, and that kind of sucks as an answer because it doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
But it's like well, some basic things are first off, making sure that your funds are covered. It can take a long time, a gestation period, before you get anywhere. And then even your first gigs, like, they probably won't pay very well or even at all. But, just keeping at it and making sure that you either have a day job or, you have some other industry that you're doing so that you can support yourself while you take the long road. Because taking shortcuts may or may not pay off in the end, and it's better to focus on how do I make sure that my work is the best that it can possibly be. There's a lot of other things you can do to ensure that. Like, for instance, for example, Pacific Drive. The only reason I got hired for that was that I was doing game jams. We used to have this group that did a horror-themed game jam every October. And it was mostly people up here in Seattle. They worked for 343 and Microsoft and Bungie and Sucker Punch at the time. And we would just, it's people who just knew each other from wherever, and we'd just get together. It was 10 of us, and we would do these games. One of them actually ended up being a shocking, huge hit. It was called Do You Copy? It just became super popular with streamers.
I've definitely heard the name of that one.
Yeah. I worked on that with Kazuma. So Kazuma,
cool.
That was the first time we worked together. Because I just kind of known him as a friend before that. And another person on that project was the creative lead on Pacific Drive. And at the time, she was just, I think she was doing environmental art or maybe art direction or something. But she had another project that she'd done, and it was okay, this looks cool, but she kind of shelved that. And then years later, Pacific Drive happened, and just called me up and said, I want you to do the music. And I was like, oh crap, yeah, let's do it. And so, I mean, doing game jams is just one example of, what's the expression? Wake up and show up. Just putting yourself out there and actually doing something. Going to conventions if you can. I know that's difficult depending on where you live, but there might be IGDA meetups in your local area where you can meet developers. Of course, there's the internet. There's all kinds of stuff going on online. There's TIG Source. There's, Kickstarters and stuff. That might be a little crazy oversaturated. I think that the common thing that you hear is, I get 100 emails from composers every single week, and I, ignore all of them and that kind of stuff, which sounds scary until you realize it's the same 100 people. So I do think that, if a game deserves music and the composer is really, ready to take it on, then, the match will be made eventually. maybe that's survivor bias, but I do believe that, you know, eventually if you are able to stick with it for long enough, while always being proactive, making friends across the industry. In my case, by the way, I would mention that it's been extremely helpful for me to not only make friends with like developers and visual artists. Many of my friends are visual artists, and they're some of my closest friends in the industry, and programmers and whatnot, but also other musicians, other composers, and sound designers in particular. When I first started, it was common that a game, like an indie game that was interested in me, also wanted sound design. And I could have said, like, I do it all, and then just, you know, tried to do both. And, you know, it would not be nearly as good. Or I could say, like, okay, I will do music, but I have a friend who you should hire for sound design. And then we kind of tag team. And then the same thing happened with the sound designer who got hired. And then they'd be like, oh, you should probably talk to Will for music. That's a great way to go about it, in my opinion, because it's so difficult to master both crafts. It's also extremely expensive to try and do both at the same time. And you literally double your chances, because it's like each one of you kind of has their own thing and is finding the right people and whatnot. Yeah. And I guess the last piece of advice is that it's less about, and this is kind of a weird one, because I just said, like, go to conventions, go to meetups and whatnot. But when you're there, it's almost like you're doing friend interviews. You know, it doesn't really matter. I know it might be appealing to say things like, oh, I just met the CEO of this game company, or I just met whatever. Yeah. It's like, hooray, look at my, like, Pokemon card, business cards, you know, whatever. And it's like, that's cool. That is actually objectively very cool. But what's more important is the people that you stay with, the people that you continue to be friends with. Like, you know, you jive with them, you just enjoy their company and vice versa. Because the reality is, later on, two things happen. One is, you know, someone's more likely to recommend a person that they actually know, that they hang out with, rather than like someone that they met once at a convention 3 years ago and they don't even remember. And two, and this is also kind of, you know, my unfiltered opinion, but like, it's very difficult for people who are not in the game industry to understand you. I know that's a very weird thing to say, but like, there's stuff that we go through that it's just different. I don't know really exactly how to explain it, but like, having a core set of other game developer friends is so vital. I mean, it's so important, because we really do go through very different experiences than even compared to like film and TV. They have their own extreme difficulties that we wouldn't understand. But having real friends in the game industry, I think, is extremely important.
Okay. But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking to me. It's been really fun and really insightful and everything. And
thanks for having me.
And again, I just such a big fan, obviously, of everything. So I'm excited to see what's coming next, what you got going on next. I'm sure there's a lot going on that obviously, you know, you probably can't talk about, but I'm very excited for it. So thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.